We never mentioned, and we never will on a main episode, the Genshin Impact, like genius
arcade mode.
What is it? It's trading card game, but it's like something. Card invocation. Yeah, trading card game.
Oh no.
Okay.
And it's a really good, very simple card game that they have in it, and man, it's just another thing for Genshin Impact to just put its little tendrils into and like get more money out of you.
Let's see if we can suck you in this way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Buy a booster.
Oh man.
What a good game that is so bad. Like I really want someone to like be preserving like a cracked version of every update so that like in the eventuality when the company I'm hoping is no longer a thing that like someone can play this game that had billions of dollars poured into it because it's fucking incredible.
Right. Yeah, that would be such a shame for all that work to go to waste.
Dude, like the hours of voice acting in every language, like from famous voice actors in every language, like the fully animated cutscenes, everything. And like all I can think about is like, when this company ceases to exist, people will probably never get to play this game. And that's woof. What a fucking waste of resources and time and energy. And let's start a podcast.
Games as a service.
On that perfect note, baby. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name's Kevin Portelli, and I'm here tonight with John Hines.
Hey there.
And Randall Nolery.
Hey, folks.
And we are back, as always, to talk about some video games. And actually, just before the session tonight, we were thinking this session was just going to be Randall and I to chat some video games. So I was like jumping on my Switch, playing some more stuff. I was like, I don't have that much to talk about. I've been pretty busy these last couple weeks. And then John was like, hey, he's been busy with tax season and whatnot. But he was like, hey, you know what? I need a little short break. I can jump on for a quick podcast session. So we were like, perfect. And there were a bunch of things that we were kind of like, oh, we'll table that because John's, we've all played that game or whatnot. So we'll finally get to some Demon Throttle and a few other things that we've talked about in the past. But before we get to that, why don't we kick it over to Randall for it's been a while since we started an episode with like a pretty new video game. Or new release of a video game. I guess not that new of a game.
Let's get into
somewhere it. Walking the fine line.
Walking a fine line. Yes.
I like to hear that, actually.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about Resident Evil 4 Remake, which, as of time of this recording, just came out a couple weeks ago. And, I'd kind of gotten out of the practice of pre-ordering too many games, especially digitally these days. So I'm like, oh, man, I can't not. I like just a little bit of history on Resident Evil 4 for me. Like, I bought the GameCube release after my buddies at the time had talked me into finally playing it, because usually I'm a kind of a horror game scaredy cat. Like I just, I try, but I'm like, oh, this is too much. Like I can't. But Resident Evil 4 being more kind of action horror, action first, horror second. Horror is the theme, action is the game, and resource management is kind of a third tier of that, I would say.
That sort of like adds to the horror or the tension or whatever, but it's not, it isn't horror like the Clock Tower or Silent Hill games. Correct. It has that same tone, but just not so, that's or not the core drive. Right. Yeah. The
even
other
Resident Evil,
which I...
Yeah. Are way more.
Those early ones. I haven't played those,
Yeah, which I did a little bit, but, I was like, I can't. This is too much. So I did play through it then back in the GameCube, late GameCube era, the original 2005 release, and then picked up the Wii release, which was like $30 at the time, which was awesome because you get that motion control and like the pointer aimer with a game like that, where Resident Evil 4 is so... it's so intricate in its like battle system, where like you can point at like the zombie, they're not actually zombies, but they're effectively zombies. You can point at their legs, they react to you shooting them in the leg, go down to one knee, and then you can run up on them and, kick them in the face, like roundhouse kick them in the face. And like that action's only available to you if you like hit them in certain ways. If you stun them, either by hitting them directly in the head or hitting them in the leg. And then that opens up this other mechanic where you can still hurt them without using your precious ammo or whatever it might. And that like that's like a game in and of itself is that battle system where you're relying a lot on these like melee attacks and using your knife and all that sort of stuff. And the Wii version almost made that too easy because the pointer controls were so specific, but that was fun too, right? Because that turns it almost a little bit like light gun-esque, which of course I love.
Yeah, and we've talked about some of those light gun games on Wii in the past and just like how that translates so well.
Yeah.
And the Resident Evil, that my only experience with 4 is playing that Wii remake. And like, I remember like a lot of those sequences, just being kind of like backed into a corner. You're kind of like going down a corridor and you really do want to like, use melee attacks as often as possible to manage your inventory of, weapons and whatnot.
Yes.
And I was going to say on a similar thing that I think we'll revisit a little bit later on in this episode, but like my only instances of having the Wii transition to like that light gun or like pointer based mechanics is in Metroid, and I was not a fan of that transition. So that was a lot of in Metroid Prime 3, a lot of like moving from a like platform based combat more to a like precision aiming combat because you could do more of that, and I wasn't as big a fan of that transition. And then of course Metroid Other M, where turning the like Wiimote turns it into the like you are stationary and aiming, and I also really did not enjoy that. So I'm not automatically sold on the concept of transitioning a traditional controller-based shooter to a Wiimote-based one.
And that's a good segue, the being stationary, because that was a conceit of Resident Evil 4 as well, and probably something that was an influence for them in designing, Other M and things like that. Because in the original version of Resident Evil 4 and the Wii version, when you pulled out your gun to shoot, you could not move besides moving where you're aiming. Like you can't walk and aim at the same time. That was just
right.
That was just built into that experience, which they built the game around that, and ended up being fine. It's just different, and you just have to get used to it, right?
Yeah.
But and that probably added to some tension, either on purpose or not.
It makes the combat like way more deliberate. Like everything is like very deliberate.
Everything's very deliberate, and I think that's what's so rewarding about that combat loop, right? And then they always drop something typically when you hit them and or when you kill them, I guess. Yeah. But all that to say, Resident Evil 4 Remake has now come out, and it is still effectively the same game, but it is a remake in that they have kind of looked at the whole thing holistically and quality improved in ways where it's still the same experience. It's one of those perfect remakes where it's like, this is as I remembered, but no, it's not. Like if you were to go back and play this, it is certainly not the exact same experience. There's a lot of little quality of life things they've done. How the menus are organized, which is going to be a theme of something I talk about later too. How you can, even big things like you can walk while you're shooting now, but it doesn't change the feel of the game necessarily. The amount of enemies in an area, what the drops are, the fact that you can't kill Stranger, the guy that sells you stuff anymore. There's a lot of a lot of the quick time events, which were kind of an infamous thing of the GameCube version. Those aren't there in the same way as much anymore, which is fine. A lot of things like that, right?
Okay, and are they giving this like the full, because they've remade 1 through 3 now as well, right?
Yes.
And are they giving this the full like visual overhaul? I mean, I know those games were coming from like PS1, and they've done a bunch of various remakes or re-releases over the years, but I know those games, they kind of like added like almost like a new mechanic to some of the games, and like obviously just totally new visuals. I think they even play in first person as opposed to like the specific camera angles and kind of scripted corridors and whatnot. So are they giving it that kind of treatment, or is it more of like just a visual overhaul, or not even that?
It's definitely a visual overhaul, and then just otherwise just gameplay treatment, enhancement stuff. It is closer to what they did in Resident Evil 2 and 3, which were the other two kind of remakes of this era that have happened already from Capcom. The Resident Evil that got released as a remake this time around is technically based off of the GameCube remake, which itself, was a remake of the PlayStation original, right?
Right.
Where they did a lot of graphical updates by that point.
This has become so involved that I also didn't even realize until we were just talking about it now that the 4 remake was in that line of 2 and 3, because I think the jump from the original and 2 to the remake of 2 was so drastic,
massive,
and I really kind of just looked at this one as oh yeah, this is kind of like a Metroid Prime Remastered, where it's the same game just with a new coat of paint and quality of life improvements. I didn't think of it as the most recent in a series of remakes of the core series.
And it's still closer to that, I would say. It's closer to the Metroid Prime style remake than it is the 2 and 3 remakes that would happen, to be fair. I would say it's closer to that, which is fine, because honestly, Resident Evil 4 is a freaking immaculate game. They didn't have to do too much.
It makes sense. I feel like they would get a lot of flack if they changed it too much. And then the 1, 2, and 3 were so different. They were dated in a way where you could kind of reimagine them. Where you don't really need to reimagine Resident Evil 4. Yeah, you just give it some quality of life stuff and probably fix a lot of the small nits and picks and stuff.
Yes, of which there were honestly few.
Not many. Yeah.
It's a game I loved then once I was kind of forced to play it and get into it. And I'm like, oh no, this is spectacular. And even now, it feels, I've played through it, and, it feels like a new game, even to me, in the sense that if this were released now and you put it in front of someone that hadn't played it, I'd be curious to see what they think of that. If it would feel aged at all to them. I'm sure in certain parts it would, in that it's not true open world. It's very corridor based, which I really like. I think it's awesome.
Oh yeah.
It's very contained level design.
I'm very curious. So ultimately, do you prefer the original to the remake?
No.
Okay.
No. I'd say right now the remake, what the changes they've made, I am really, really into the remake.
That's awesome to hear.
Interesting, because you sounded so high on the original that
yes,
I was kind of getting the impression that you still prefer the original, but
no.
To have that high praise that the remake is actually the definitive version is great.
Yes,
because
it's awesome.
Because, Randall, you're the reason that I picked up the Resident Evil 4, Wii port or whatever back in the day, because that was when we were working at Best Buy.
Yeah.
And, you had just been you've never played this game? Oh, my God, you have to get. I think it was $20 at the time when I got it, or maybe with a discount or whatever. But I was just okay, there's no. I think I actually ended up getting rid of the game at some point, because I was I'm not a horror gamer. I couldn't get into this or whatever. But now looking back, I'm man. But now looking back, or just looking at right now, I'm I should probably play the remake, even though I do like those Wii aiming controls.
Oh, yeah. And it's not it is not an easy game. There is a learning curve there.
Yeah, I remember it being hard on Wii too.
It doesn't even necessarily play like a lot of other games. I guess in a weird way, the Last of Us games are what was influenced by Resident Evil 4. So maybe there's some through line there for Last of Us players where they'd feel, or I've heard the new Dead Space that's coming out seems like it's taken a lot from Resident Evil 4. So
even Gears of War, a tad, just that really close, more the perspective shoulder than anything. Yeah, that third person over the shoulder, but almost feels like a first person perspective. It's in there so close.
Yeah. But it's so, God, it's I'm so hooked on this. I am NBA 2K Breath of the Wild sort of hooked on this.
Nice.
I want to play this every night. I'm if I wasn't recording this podcast, I'd be playing Resident Evil 4 Remake right now. At least for an hour or two.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a good praise.
Yeah, it's been a little while since I've had a game like that. And a lot of times it's because of my own fault. For example, I still haven't started Metroid Prime Remastered yet, even though I've had it for a while, because I'm well, maybe I should stream it. Well, I don't know. I'm not in the mood to stream, so I'll play it a different time. And we were talking about before we started recording, it's well, the cartridge isn't in. I was just playing Mario Kart. I got to go dig out the cartridge. And just always an excuse to not start it. But
yes.
This is all good stuff to hear, especially from somebody who was already a big fan of the original. And it's funny how I feel I don't want to speak for you, Randall, but I know I've been kind of like leaning in that direction of just like, I'm kind of more into these remakes a lot of times. Not to say that they're all winners every time, but like when a remake's done right, I'm kind of just like, yeah, I don't need to play the original anymore. I'm glad it exists, and I'm glad that it was the, source material for this new remake. But like, okay, cool. I don't need to. I'll probably still keep them in my collection in a lot of cases, but like there's some where I'm like, I could probably get rid of some of these like older iterations of these games.
Yep.
Guys, don't convince me to buy the Tales of Symphonia remake. I do not need to own that game another time.
Yeah,
you do.
Probably not, but hey.
I'm very close.
Well, how about let's make a deal. If the next Nintendo console is backwards compatible with the Switch games, then I think you gotta
have to.
You gotta get it.
We'll get like a terabyte SD card and like
at that point they'll be like $30 and you'll be good to go.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you're playing this on Xbox, Randall, the Resident Evil remake?
Yeah. I'm playing it on Xbox Series X, and, it just feels and plays just beautifully. Oh, my God. It's still one of my favorite games, period. I don't know, like, if I were to make a list, I don't think it'd be any worse than, like, top 20 all time for me personally. Probably higher.
Yeah,
probably
we've played a lot of games, so.
Yeah. Oh, God, it's so good. It's so good. You can craft things. There's resource management. It's all my favorite stuff.
Now that you mentioned kind of like The Last of Us Light, I mean, granted, I only played the first like season, if you will, the first quarter of Last of Us, but I'm like, I can definitely see some of that influence there in the resource management, especially.
Weirdly enough, when I was playing Last of Us Part 1, I wasn't thinking, oh, this is just Resident Evil 4, but like looking back, like, oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, just a little more to it, yeah.
Yeah, that's the influence. So, it makes sense. I will talk about this again. Man, I love this game. I'm seeing it through.
Heck yeah. For a second, I thought you were going to say it was on Game Pass when you were saying Xbox stuff. I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to download it and fire it up then.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I guess we'll stick in like the kind of, it's not really a horror game per se, but it's got a similar theme to it. And it's a game that we've all played and we've been tabling for quite some time. I even mentioned it at the beginning here, I think. But I've mentioned it on a few episodes of Save It for the Cast. And whatnot, just kind of like the whole saga of tracking down my physical copy of Demon Throttle. Mm-hmm. And just to give a short synopsis of that, like they released it's a physical only game on Nintendo Switch. It might actually be on other platforms too. I think it is. PlayStation 4 maybe as well, but it's from Special Reserve Games, is the publisher. And then Doink Soft is the developer, and Devolver is actually also the publisher, which Devolver actually just bought Doink Soft. I saw Doink Soft was just like, Doink Soft is Devolver's problem now. And I was like, that's a great way to announce that. I love it. Because I'm really excited for their next upcoming game, Gunbrella, as well, which looks more akin to Gato Roboto. So anyways, long story short, because I loved Gato Roboto so much, I was like, I got to track down... I got sidetracked here, but Demon Throttle got announced as like a physical only game, and there was like a limited amount, and I was like, okay, I'm unemployed right now, I don't need to buy this $40 or $30 game or whatever. It's a limited run, I'm just gonna have to miss out on it. And then after a few months, they shipped them out or whatever, and then they announced the second pressing of the game, and I was like, okay, I guess I can't miss out on this twice. If they're going to give me a second opportunity, I got to go track it down. So I ordered it on Amazon. My order got canceled. I canceled it because it was like, there was some kind of mix up with the delivery date and like the wrong version or whatever. So I was like, okay, they have them at Best Buy. I'm just going to go get it in the store. Went and picked it up at Best Buy. It didn't have the manual and stickers in it and stuff. And I was like, man, I'm missing goodies and whatever. And so I put like a post on our Twitter page, like, oh man, it's missing these goodies. I can't wait to start up this game. And Doink Soft actually reached out to us and they're like, hey, what's your address? And they ended up, and after going back and forth with them a few times, they sent me like a special edition version of the game, which is like an upgraded version of the retail version that I had, which was, it's so cool of them to reach out. And I felt like a huge jerk. And this will probably end up being on a Save It for the Cast if it hasn't been on already. But like, I was like, after I realized, I was like, oh, the version that is in retail stores wasn't supposed to come with any of the extra goodies. It was just like a retail only kind of stripped down version of the game. But anyways, they were like, oh, we saw that you posted, saw that you were excited about the goodies. Like, I thought they were just going to send a regular version. They sent me like the full collector's edition. It's got like a cardboard slipcase, like a little like window cut out of the back of it that shows like the limited number of how many, like out of 4,000 or something. So I was like, okay, well now I have 2 copies of this like super limited game. I feel like a huge asshole now. So on my last trip to Chicago, I was like, okay, I'll bring John my copy that I bought from Best Buy at the store. And, long story short, him and I actually played a co-op session with the game. I had played quite a few sessions of the game solo and had been having a blast with the game. And then Randall, he was actually the one, I know you had already ordered it, I think on the initial run, if I'm not mistaken.
Of course. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this will just be something we can talk about on the podcast. So I need to order it now that Randall's already got it. And I am not disappointed in this game. I was a little bit surprised by the tone of the game. It's got a weird sense of humor. We mentioned it kind of having a horror kind of theme to it or whatever. And it's got a very 8-bit NES vibe. It's not necessarily true to NES aesthetics in every way. I'm sure there's more colors.
The tone of it is way more arcade than anything else. It definitely feels like the oh, we're gonna give you the pulpiest story in this opening cutscene so that you know your motivation 100%, no ambiguity.
Yeah, they're almost little mini Kirby style cutscenes, oh, you're in a new world. Here's a little quick cutscene showing introducing you to this stage or whatever. And it was a little bit different than I expected. My initial instinct was oh, it's gonna be this kind of super, kind of long arcade adventure. I thought it was just going to be a little bit different, but playing through it, even solo, I actually have beaten the game a few times, although not properly. John and I actually beat it as well, although not there. So you can actually get 4 hidden challenges. So there's 4 stages in the game, which that was my initial reaction was just oh, this game's kind of short and whatever. But now that I've seen all the different variations, as you play the game more and more, you kind of unlock almost different skins or different themes for the level. So you might play the first stage and it might be raining and that might change the dynamics a little bit, or you might play the third ice level and it might be snowing. And I don't know what unlocks things. I don't know if it's something that you do or just getting a certain number of points. It's just kind of after I die or something. So it's kind of the game isn't a roguelike, and the levels are all scripted each time. It's the same every time you play for the most part. There might be a little bit of randomness going on, but for the most part, it seems all the drops happen. There's little upgrades if you blow up the trees. It's got very much almost a Zelda style top down aesthetic, for lack of a better comparison. And you can blow up the trees or the rocks or the bushes or whatever, and those might drop a speed upgrade or a shield or extra health or.
And because the screen scrolling, you have to get that shit real fast too. A lot of times,
and especially if you're playing
side to side.
Yeah, it was a whole different ball game playing 2 players with John. Playing single player, it's really cool because there's 2 different characters and you can swap between them at will when you're playing single player. And each of them have their own health bar, their own it's almost a mini RPG upgrades. There's just some little stat sheet where there's a few different ammo and power and stuff like that and whatnot, and you can kind of pick when you're playing single player which character you want to pick up all those upgrades with, and they get maxed out eventually. You can't stack them indefinitely, but it changed the whole dynamic, and especially playing 2 players because so on each stage there's almost a hidden underground lair that you can find, and that's how you find the hidden chalices. So right at the start of the game you find out the demon steals 4 of the huntress's chalices, one of the characters, and then kidnaps the hunter or the cowboy's girlfriend or whatever, or his wife or whatever it is. But yeah, I just feel I lost my train of thought there. What was I just going to say about that? Oh, on the 4 stages, there's 4 different stages. And then on the underground, so almost like Zelda style, you blow up a tree, or how you'd the bushes on fire and there'd be a little staircase going underground. And then that's how it'll work. You'll go to this underground second level almost, that you have to beat these other demons and get a chalice at the end of that stage. And then you still have to finish the stage you were already on. So there are almost 8 stages in a long roundabout way. And yeah, John and I were only able to get the first 3 chalices. I think we missed the 4th one. I know we missed one of them. So we actually beat the final boss and everything on the 4th stage, but you see the credits roll and everything, but it's kind of oh, but you didn't really beat the game. It definitely kind of lets you know oh, but you didn't get all the chalices.
The true ending.
Come back for more. Yeah. But back to the tone. I'm assuming you haven't made it to the final boss, Randall, because I don't really want to add any spoilers
to the
mix.
Level, man. It's a hard game.
It is a very hard game. I was kind of surprised.
Beat it. What? This is
a lot of people.
Game.
A lot of my friends, when I was initially posting about it, just taking some clips on my Switch, and they were saying oh yeah, this game's so hard every time I posted about it. I was man, I made it to the final boss on my 2nd run of the game, I think. Not anywhere near getting all the chalices.
Ever beaten this game? Like, that's a hyperbole. Like, I think if I had actually like sat down with the dedication to beat it, I could have beaten it. But like, I could only see myself beating this game like 100% in the context of playing it 2-player. Like, it is a hard game.
It definitely made things much easier because it does do like if you're able to beat a stage on 2-player, like the second player comes back on the next stage with full health, if I'm not mistaken.
Love it.
So but they don't get like the
power
the XP you get from like killing the boss and stuff like that. So there are some like things where, or like if you're playing 1-player and like I tend to like lean into the huntress who has a crossbow, a little more of a spread
shot
with the shot. And as you upgrade, you can get a little bit more arrows or a little bit quicker tempo to your reload or refiring or whatever. But then all of a sudden, if you've been leaning into upgrading that character and then you die on the boss, just like, oh, now I got this shitty cowboy that's got these little, might as well have a potato gun shooting it at the boss. And it's like, oh, man, like at this point, I might as well just die and start over.
Cowboy can hit hard, though, if you upgrade him, though.
Oh, yeah, and really start shooting fast and has more health. I think he has 5 instead of 4 health. So it really especially was fun playing with John, like kind of like, okay, you get the shield. Okay, you get the upgrade, like kind of like divvying up the upgrades as opposed to like just kind of like hoping I don't die with the huntress and just leaning into, upgrading that pretty much indefinitely until I maxed everything out. But yeah, I don't know. I've really enjoyed playing both single player and multiplayer. It's a game that like I definitely, if I ever, hang out with Randall in person or any just like retro friends that are into retro games, I'll be like, hey, let's fire up some Demon Throttle, play some co-op and see if we can beat this game. But I've really enjoyed. I love the music.
Yeah.
Again, the tone was really probably my only. I wouldn't even call it a complaint, but it's just like a little bit immature and childish and try-hardy and like it's not even a negative thing, but like it was just kind of like I'm too old for this.
It's
shit.
not a positive thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a selling point by any means,
Yes.
It's not. It doesn't make me like hate the game or anything, but it's just like that's not really bringing me anything other than like a small smirk or chuckle at best, and I think they're hoping for a little more than that. And then when you play it again and again, you're like, this is ridiculous, a little bit much.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I know I probably have spent the most time with this game, but either of you have any other thoughts before we move on here? I know I kind of just rambled incessantly on that game.
We piped
it's good.
Yeah, it's definitely a ton of fun.
I'm glad I got it, and I'm glad I got it when I did. Like I always loved those sort of modern retro games, of which obviously thanks to the Godfather Shovel Knight, that is just its own subgenre these days. But I'm happy for it. I'll keep taking those as long as folks keep making them. Yeah, I hope it was successful. I want another one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Well, I guess it was successful enough for Devolver to buy Doinksoft.
Yeah.
So they're at least, they got that in their back pocket.
For real.
So, yeah, congrats to them. And thanks to them again for sending the copy of the game my way. I was like, I felt like such a jerk just being like, oh, complaining. Now I got a free copy of the game. But anyways, super cool of them to send it our way and a really, really cool game. So, why don't I kick it your way, John, for some of the stuff that you've been playing on Switch lately?
So, yeah, I was actually thinking very much about how, like, forward referential or self-referential this episode is. I think this is the most like interconnected every topic is. And just like we were talking about remakes and other stuff. So like I recently did beat Metroid Prime Remastered. I figured that I owed it to myself to actually complete a game that I like.
Absolutely.
And like I wanted to see exactly like how it fared all the way through. And I will say, I think like Final Judgment, I would probably replay the GameCube version as my like top version of the game, just because like I really do love that original control scheme. I haven't tried the GameCube control scheme, but I like the new control scheme. Like playing the new version on the Switch, I prefer playing the like Switch controller scheme, but I think that my preferred control scheme is on a GameCube controller.
And so, on Remastered, you were playing with Switch Joy-Cons, correct?
I was playing with a Pro controller.
You were playing the Pro controller. Okay.
Just like
so
the
we're playing the same way.
stick controls, like FPS
Yep.
standard.
Exactly. With like and it's so customizable too.
Yeah.
God, that game is so good. Like the controls, like they have a lot of options. I don't think they offer a full remap, but they do offer a lot of like inverting axes and like, do you want the D-pad to switch your beams, or do you want it to switch your visors without pressing X as like operating a submenu? And like it offered a lot of customization, but like that GameCube controller is just so perfectly mapped 1-to-1 that like it really is like
some of those games that were designed on GameCube, it's like something about that like nub C stick and like the big A button.
Oh yeah,
those, like only the two shoulder button. I guess you have the Z button as well, but like the two kind of like soft shoulder buttons and those scoops. Like there are certain games that are just like this just feels right. I mean, there's a reason why they made GameCube controllers for Smash, and people were just like, I just can't play it any other way,
100%. And like, that said, it was still an incredible game, like all the way through. And if you've never played the original GameCube and don't like have a GameCube, like this is absolutely like 100% the game. Like you are getting the full experience, like playing this remastered version. And it's got a lot of like updates to it that feel really nice. Like the graphics are just one of the things, but overall, I think they did an incredible job with it. And my expectations are now higher than ever with Metroid Prime 4, and God, I can't wait for that to be a disaster in my own making. But
hey, you know what? I actually wonder though if you could use those Switch GameCube controllers and then you do the old GameCube control scheme on the Switch version of the game.
This might be too many. This may be too many peripherals,
too many layers,
even for me, and like that's saying a lot.
I think people have
is a lot of hoops.
I don't know if they were successful or not, but I think they have tried to do exactly that.
Okay, cool.
So I'm curious though, John, because I am very hazy with the original experience of playing Metroid Prime, and I played already a lot more of the remaster. So to me, it is they just slapped a new graphical paint on there and called it a day. But it's an awesome game, so it doesn't matter. But it sounds like they of course did more than just that to make this a little bit more quality of life streamlined potentially in the experience.
And it's pretty much just controls. Like that's honestly like there's not really that much other than like maybe faster load times, and I don't even know if that's necessarily true, but like it pretty much is just a 1-to-1 remake, and like it didn't need anything else. Like
it does exactly.
That says a lot. That just says a lot. Now I'm curious though, being such a big Metroid fan, do you prefer the 3D to the 2D, or do you have, or are they just too different? Or
it's a big question.
Okay, so this does feed into the other thing, is that while I was playing Prime Remastered, I was also playing Fusion on the GBA Switch Online.
Nice.
And
I need to boot that up.
Oh my God. It's also just like both of those are two of my favorite games of all time. Great and like having access to both of them on the same system, like within like immediate switching between the two, like that was also
I'm stuck on Prime. Let me boot up Fusion. Yeah.
God. Yeah. So it's really difficult to say. Like they are so far and away in like my top 5 games of all time that like it's really hard to like say that I have a preference, because they're both like some of the most enjoyable moments I've had playing video games are in those two specific modes. So like that's I don't know if I can choose between the two, but when I did beat Prime Remastered, I had somehow gotten into my head of like, well, I still want to play a Metroid game, but I don't want to play the one that I just finished playing. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to boot up Dread for the first time since I beat it the original time. And I also I had kind of gotten used to, I was playing Prime on a regular difficulty, and I have no have that game memorized. And then Fusion, I was also playing on the regular difficulty, and I had that game memorized. So I wasn't really looking for a hard time. So I was like, hey, they added rookie mode to Dread, and I'm like, I've got nothing to prove to anyone. I've already beaten that game.
Yeah, I just want to play this game again.
Was that an update that they added afterwards, the rookie mode?
Yeah,
I
rookie
guess
mode
I didn't realize
was
that.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's
and
cool.
It's cool, and it's also like they still have the insta kill like Emmy mode, but they already had like that was a kind of. They had instituted the checkpoint system so that you could like just respawn right outside of the Emmy zone where you died in. So like that wasn't necessarily that much of a difficulty thing that they removed, but just the regular core difficulty of the game in general, like having that kind of removed from the equation is like, cool. Now I can just kind of learn this game in a way that I've learned like Prime and Fusion over the years. Yeah. And it's super fun. I really recommend playing in rookie mode because it's a great leap. It's an incredibly designed game.
Yeah. Especially after you already beat through once. I feel like that's, it's kind of what I'm doing with Resident Evil 4 as well, even though there's updates. It's just like, it's fun to go back through a game that you're already familiar with through a different lens. Yeah. That's awesome.
And you get to experience it in a completely different way. It's like no longer like I do get like the idea of like, okay, well, a game on its first playthrough is going to have the most impact on you because you're like learning it as you're playing it. And so, yeah, I get that kind of wonder is taken away from me. But like when I get to a section where like I remember like playing for the first time and feeling like so triumphant when I got it in the first time, and I play it on this easier difficulty and I don't get it on the first time. I'm like, well, this sucks.
This game sucks.
But it's still, oh God, what a incredibly designed game.
It's brilliant.
That's awesome to hear too, because I feel like, it's one thing for you to be like, oh, I got like, Metroid Prime is like, I love that game so much. Replaying it's just like kind of comfort and whatever angle you're looking at it from. But like to just replay this for the second time, yeah, you love Metroid and you did love that game the first time through, but it's not like through the same nostalgic lens, but still just replaying it, in just a different mode is like, oh yeah, I can appreciate this game even more or differently or whatever. Even when Randall was kind of talking about, oh, they need to bring that Samus Returns port to Switch in that engine or make a sequel. I'm like, man, that just really has me needing to boot up Dread again because I got those amiibos that are just staring me down every time I open the closet, which could make the game a little bit easier for me.
Extra energy tank, man. Yep, it's big time.
Yeah, like, no messing around.
Yeah, and we can't leave this without saying what we were saying in the Discord of like that John pointed out. The control and the flow of Metroid Dread is just impeccable. It feels so good.
Yep,
so good. It's perfect. It's butter. It's so good.
It does get very complicated at the end of the game when you're like, all right, I need the grapple bean, and then I need to go directly into a missile, and then I need to like do an air dash. So like there is a learning curve, but like
it's rewarding.
It's very rewarding, and after you've done it once, then it does kind of come back to you. Like that was the thing I was most worried about, was being like, I remember how hard like the final boss was, and how hard like parts of the game were, and like I've still definitely died to bosses, but like all it takes is that one time to kind of like remember all of the patterns. So like it's kind of getting to that point where I'm like, it's similar to Fusion and Prime, where it's like I know the optimized path just by playing the game over and over again. And I really appreciate them adding the rookie mode, because that was what I needed to both get the satisfaction of like kind of playing with training wheels, but at the same time, like I still don't know this game. Like this is still basically a brand new game to me.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, you guys got me definitely wanting to boot up some Metroid. But before we kick it over to Randall, you got a little more Switch to talk about, Johnny
I was going to say the other unexpected connection that you were mentioned was Gunbrella, because you know what game has an umbrella that's a gun? That's right, it's Splatoon 3, the best shooter that just at the time of this recording recently ended a Splatfest, which was the first of this version that I had participated in.
Okay.
And it was the first that had added 3 teams.
I was going to say they do 3 teams now,
teams.
right?
Yeah. So it's a little bit harder for the internet to game because it's harder to get everybody
Predict
to join
what people
on
are
the
going to
same-
pick for. Yeah,
exactly. Even though I did never encounter a Bigfoot, so maybe there is a concentrated effort to never join one of the 3 teams. Or maybe people didn't believe in Bigfoot like they did in Aliens or Nessie. And I want to proudly rep Team Nessie, but and it's such a good game. Man, I am really excited with how much more I've played this than 2 because it makes
I love
me
to hear
feel
that. Yeah.
a lot better about myself, like having bought this game. But man, like it's such a really well-made game, and like I think the matchmaking has gotten a lot better, and I've not had as many games dropped, though I still get like a ton of like ones that do just get disconnected over like the match, and it's embarrassing that that's even a thing, because I don't think that's ever happened, Kevin, when we've played Overwatch, and Randall when we played Overwatch. There's no reason
into the mix or something, you know. I feel like there's a solution.
Invest in servers
yes,
when they host
exactly.
these games versus Nintendo that's a cheap ass that does peer-to-peer connections.
Yeah.
Which is embarrassing. But
yes,
it's still a very good game, and I'm enjoying it a lot. And that's also been kind of one of my comfort games recently, is just logging on, playing Splatoon for a while listening to a podcast, and like surprisingly enough, like, and I don't know if this is also a factor. I think I've been attributing so much of patience in video games to Monster Hunter for me personally, but I honestly do think that like playing Monster Hunter just like unlocked something in my brain where I was like, hey, maybe games can be slower and you can be better at them when you actually take the time to learn how to play them.
Right.
And hey, it's been working out for me so far, and probably will continue.
Rewarding. Yes.
Yeah, I love to hear that, because especially after you being kind of on the fence about picking up Splatoon 3, like, okay, yeah, I liked Splatoon 2, but I don't really need to get this one. And I love that your godson just got the ball rolling on Splatoon 3. And now you got me, like, even though I say it every time, I'm not going to get it. But I'm still like, but Splatoon 3 looks kind of colorful and fun.
I would get it discounted. I've heard
if it was like $30 or $40,
yeah, I would.
I'd snag it down the line.
Yeah,
highly recommend it.
Yeah,
if you like that type of game, I
do.
Yeah. Well, speaking of liking that type of game, and me not liking that type of game, why don't I kick it over to Randall for some of another new game that that you've been playing, and not me.
So new, it's not even released yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know our buddy Mikey, when we were playing Overwatch the other day, he was kind of like, there were a couple times that we were trying to coordinate, and he was like, nope, the beta's out. I got to check this out. Sorry, guys, I'm busy.
Yes. The Diablo IV beta.
Yes, a little more Blizzard action, baby.
Yeah. And so, more history context. Tina and I played the mess out of Diablo 3. We played it all the way through, both on PlayStation 4 and on Switch.
Yes.
And that was easily warranted because they kept adding these expansions that would add new characters and levels and all kinds of, like, tons and tons of content. Yeah. And, so we know that game in and out. We knew that we were going to play Diablo 4. I saw this open beta. I'm not usually like, let me jump into the beta kind of guy, but it was just like sitting there for me, and I've got the new Xbox. I'm like, why not? Check it out, see what's different. And it is more of that. It is more of the Diablo, and another theme of quality of life upgrades comes through in, the menus. It's all about the menus.
Mikey mentioned that as well, and I was like, oh, nice. They made things a little cleaner. He's like, no, they made it worse for you. Like there's more menys.
There's more shit to look through, but it's easier to look through said shit, I would say,
Okay.
It's way, way better organized menu-wise, and just as crucially, if you're playing 2-player on the same system, before you would have to essentially pause the game to look through your inventory of things. And that is no longer the case One person can look at their menu, again, a la like throwback to GameCube is the first thing that comes to mind, playing like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, where like you could go into your own menu on your Game Boy Advance to do your shit while the game was still going. The same effective thing is happening here in Diablo 4. You can menu to your heart's content while the other person is killing monsters or looting around or doing whatever, and it's just they've heard the feedback. They are making the little quality of life upgrades they need to make this an even better experience, even though it's ultimately a through line of the same experience, just with a new coat of paint and some new, character types and whatever else, right?
Yeah, but that's awesome to hear, though, too, because I feel like with Diablo 3, I remember when that first launched, it was like everybody kind of was shitting on that game when it first came out, and then they really kept patching it, updating it. Yeah, listening to the complaints, and at least the diehard Diablo fans. I remember when that game first came out, they were like not into that game, it seemed. And then over time, like once they brought it to consoles and kind of had like I don't know what they called it, but like the Diablo 3 Definitive Edition or whatever, that was like, okay, this is like, people love this game now all of a sudden. I was like, man, they've really turned that around, because it really seemed like people were not happy when it first released.
That's because Blizzard was being gross about it and adding a whole like monetization shop thing into Diablo 3 during the height of the mobile days, and they thought that they could get away with
boxes,
that. Yeah. And then they started like pulling that stuff back out to make it more of the traditional Diablo experience, to kind of save that experience, get back to the core of it. And, that made all the difference, And that's the version of it that I ended up playing. I didn't play the Diablo 3 when it first came out. I waited until an expansion or two had come out before buying it.
Nice. And that's cool that you played this beta on consoles. I just always assumed it was like, beta's on PC or whatever. Right. I was actually a little bit surprised. But actually, now that I think about it, I'm like, you don't really play on PC all that much. But I'm like, I was a little bit surprised that you were able to do this on a console.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Xbox is the most PC of consoles anyway. But
yeah, that's
but true. Especially two-player on console. That sounds really good.
And it let Tina make like her own account, and it just treated us individually that way. And I don't know if that's going to let us carry over anything or not, but we're like, even if it doesn't, it was kind of cool to like have jumped into a beta experience. And that's not to say it was some like perfectly smooth thing. It was beta. There was, every so often some like graphical thing would get stuck and sort of like jank around, and you'd be like, oh, that didn't seem quite right, or like there'd be some like pop-in stuff that was very awkward, and you're like, oh no, this is still very beta, they're not quite at launch yet. And in the modern new console era, games launch and still get mega patches after they launch.
Big time. So and sometimes never get fixed, in some cases.
Yep. But it's great. It's more of that, and they've made it even better and more friendly to how I want to play that, which is, comparing numbers, in sub menus and, upgrading things. So they've done the thing that I want them to do more effectively without, upsetting the person I'm playing with by having the game paused for longer than it needs to be.
The main thing that I remember is like when we would play Diablo 3 with like the boss fight guys, and we'd like get a session together, and like we'd get to like the kind of town area and start like, okay, now here's where you can or the hub or whatever, and you can, this is where you can upgrade weapons and talk to the merchants and go into whatever. And like, I was just like, I don't have the, like, I thought like I just want to hang out and talk on Skype or Discord or wherever we're hanging out, and like I don't want to like ingest all this information.
RPG mechanics, bud.
Yeah, it's almost like a game that I think I said this before when we talked about it ages and ages ago on the podcast, but it's like I wish I should have put some time in single player, learn the ropes and kind of like got the feel so that it's just second nature, and I know what all the numbers mean and categories and whatever. And now I'm just playing with my friends and BSing and, looking at the numbers every once in a while and just, okay, that's green or that's got an up arrow. Okay, cool. That's what I need.
Yep. Yeah, it is kind of MMO-esque that way, I would say. You got to put a little bit of time in on your own first and then bring in your experience to get the most out of it in a multiplayer sense,
Yeah. Yeah, but what would you say other than like some of the glitches, like as far as like your first time digging into some beta stuff? Is it something that you're like, hey, if there's ever games in the future, I would check them out if they were something that you're interested in? Or is it just because it was Diablo?
I think, it's weird because like Diablo has its own story, but that's never, the main focus. But, even to be said, they've integrated that even, I think, a little bit better into this experience where they're trying to give you a story, but it's pretty well produced, but still kind of within the flow of the game. I think they've got a really good mix of that, but because it's not so story focused, I think that's also a factor why I was willing to do it here, where, if they ever did, like, for instance, I don't know, like even like a Zelda beta or something else to that effect, I would never give that a shot. I would be like, no, I'm saving myself.
Yeah, I want to see this when it's done.
Release. Like most of the time, I don't think I would, just for that reason. But this just kind of hit that perfect. But what about a
demo for Kirby? What's that fine line between a demo and a beta?
Hey, that demo unlocked special things for me in the final release.
And it is always nice when they at least, like, when it is just kind of the opening chunk of a game or something to that effect where it just carries over and like, okay, I don't have to replay that tutorial, or I don't have to do this or that anymore.
Yeah.
That's always a nice little bonus to check out a demo, I guess.
Modern RPGs have been very good at that sort of thing.
Especially like the Octopath, Traveler.
I was going to say
the
triangle strategy just went for like, here's the 5th like battle in the game, and I was like, this is kind of interesting, where it's like they want to give you enough characters that like it's interesting to play, but like it was just like, all right, I guess that character dies like in the story. It's like,
Jeez.
Like I guess like maybe it could be a way to get you invested early, kind of.
It kind of did. I mean, not gonna say it didn't work as like just getting in media res. I'm like, why is everyone so upset?
Hey, there is something to be said. I do love when a game or movie or something just kind of picks up in the middle of like some kind of suspense or whatever, and you're like, wait, I don't know who these characters are, but I can already tell there's this is important. I gotta pay attention here.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious. I'm sure we'll be talking more Diablo down the line.
Oh yeah.
Probably more Blizzard stuff, because like we mentioned, we got a short little gaming session in with, we actually ended up playing even some Mario Kart after some Overwatch 2, playing some of those new Mario Kart tracks. So I got my ass kicked again the other night in some Mario Kart by my Michigan friends. I was like, oh, I'll try a new character. I'll try something new. Unlock some new cards.
Don't experiment with other people.
Last place. I tried out Wendy this time around.
Ghosts. That's true.
That's not a bad idea, but oh man, yeah. I was like 100 points behind the next human player in front of me. It was a joke, and there were no computer players separating us.
By how much you beat like Randall and me.
That's what I mean.
I know.
God,
I know. Like Glenn, our buddy Glenn was like, "Oh yeah, you're so good at Mario Kart." I was like, "Dude, I definitely don't feel like it lately. I'm just getting my ass handed to me."
Because you're playing against like a group of like people who've played it like year in and year out.
Memorized.
They have it memorized.
Every shortcut. If you have a mushroom, they know exactly where to use it.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh man. But yeah, I don't know. Any more video game chit chat this week, guys? Or good to wrap it up there for this one?
I'm all out of video games.
Nice. Yeah, I am as well. So yeah, we'll leave it there for this week. And as always, you can find us on the internet at pursuingpixels.com. We're pretty much everywhere else on any other platform you can imagine. And otherwise, until then, we'll catch you next week. Take care, and yeah.
Bye. Good God, Kev.
Good night.
Take care.
Keep it.
Bye-bye.
I love it. That works for me.
I
was like, I forgot, like, there's like one line I forgot.
Laughing.
I was like, there's one line I forgot in there that's like, or either I said one thing too many times or I forgot one part of it. And I was like, I don't know which one.
You didn't close the thread, man. You didn't close the thread.
I know, like, you could, like, that could have just been a dismount, but like, you just kept running. Like,
you know what? I think I kind of left it. I think I left it a little bit like a save it for the cast, because I always kind of leave it like, and we'll catch you next week, and I'll kick it over to the guys or whatever.
Yeah.
I kind of had that in my mind, and whatever, it works.
It's like when you're at a show where a band like does a bunch of like staccato notes at the end of a song, and you know what the last one is.
Yeah.
And they just don't hit that last note.
Feels bad. Feels bad.
Like, you got everything. Just hit that last one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Give us
Take
what we
the
want.
exit ramp.
Yes. Let's have closure.
Oh man.
Hit the root note. God.
Yes. It's all about those root notes, baby.
Root notes.